everyone, and welcome back to Mining Network. So I'm joined with Tara Christie here, who is CEO of Banyan Gold. So thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you. Great to see you again.
Likewise. So let's just start by getting a lovely overview of who Banyan Gold are.
So Banyan Gold, we're focused on our AurMac Project in Mayo, Yukon territory, which I think is Canada's newest gold mining district. We're right beside Victoria Gold, also adjacent to Hecla's Keno Hill, formerly Alexco. We're growing our AurMac resource from 4 million ounces, had a really aggressive 2022 drill program, and have lots of news to share with our shareholders and your audience.
So run us through your background a little bit. What gives you the experience to run a company like Banyan?
Well, I spent my whole career in the mining industry. I spent 20 years actually running a large-scale alluvial mining operation where you had to do everything. I was doing the permitting, the budgeting, the financing, the hiring, even running the equipment. In that time, I also spent a considerable amount of time doing exploration with my father, who's a PhD geologist. We actually assembled quite a large land package. I spent quite a few years running a consulting company, doing a lot of permitting, environmental assessment, working with First Nations. I joined public company boards over the last 20 years, so I got some experience in other places in the world. I even worked for a major. I worked for Newmont for a few years up on Hope Bay. I was actually their registered lobbyist in Canada for a couple of years. So I think I have a pretty broad experience, including being on the environmental assessment board in the Yukon. I was actually the chair of the rules committee, and I spent 12 years involved in that. So I've been on the private business side. I've had some experience of what it's like to be on the assessor, a little bit the regulatory side of things. I've worked for a major. I even did some work in Africa on some gold projects. So I've been around a little bit. And I think that's a key thing that you need to be as a CEO of a junior mining company, is you need to know about every aspect of it, from the permitting to the hiring in the community, to how to work with First Nations, and then you need the geology and how to technically execute. So I think my background really gave me a bit of an advantage. And in 2016, after I'd sold our alluvial company, I was working for Kamenak, and they got bought out by Gold Corp. I decided not to join the environmental assessment board, and it really seemed ideal to take over being the CEO of Banyan in 2016. So, and it's been a pretty short journey to where we are right now.
Brilliant. So run us through the market cap share structure, how much cash is in the bank, that sort of thing.
So our last financials were $18 million. Mm-hmm. By the end of 2022, we'll still have $10 million in the bank. Share structure, well, we're currently at about 42 cents today. Makes us about 110 million market cap. So in a pretty good place. If you look at where we are relative to our peers in this current environment, we've actually done pretty well. We've maintained our price fairly close to our last financing.
Brilliant. So last time we met, we were in the Yukon, actually looking at the rocks, and you were talking about a new financing and also 60,000 meters of drilling. So could you talk me through how that's all gone and where you're at now?
Yeah, that was really exciting, and that financing was really important to us. 17 million in June 2022, no warrants, really solid shareholders. It really positioned us well for this year. We drilled 50,000 meters before we just shut down the drill here. We decided to save some drilling for next year, so that leaves us 15,000 meters of drilling for next year. That winter drilling gets more expensive. We also really wanted to wait for our assays back from what we drilled this year. We actually ended up having 4 drills turning on the property in October, which is really exciting. We think we've got some great results coming. We've already released 111 holes from this season. We have another 100 drill holes of results, which we'll be able to share with the market as we get assays. So should be pretty exciting into 2023.
Yeah, definitely, it sounds it. So for those less familiar, talk us through the geological setting of the AurMac project.
Sure, it's an intrusion-related deposit. The main deposit is our Powerline deposit, which is a sheeted vein deposit. We get these layers, and they're roughly horizontal, which is interesting. Between 3 and 9 different layers that we know about now. We aren't really chasing this mineralization to depth. We've focused on sort of the top 200 meters because that's about what an economic pit would be if this is a heap leach project. The Airstrip deposit is slightly different. It's a little bit to the north. We know that it dips roughly underneath the Powerline deposit. It's a calcareous replacement deposit. So we are really focused on Powerline and Aurex Hill because we can see that unit, that silicious unit in the geophysics over 16 kilometers. And so some of the work that we did this year was expanding Powerline. So Powerline itself, that 3 million ounces is in about 1.2 kilometers of east-west strike. We've drilled over a kilometer west. We've drilled 2 and 4 kilometers east. And then we took some really big step outs and got those holes on the far eastern end of the property, almost 6 kilometers away, which really, I think is going to show what the big picture potential here is on the property. We've been telling shareholders that our next threshold is really to get it to that tier 1 status, bigger than 5 million ounces. A tier 1 status for a major varies a little bit, but over 5 million ounces or something that would produce potentially 300,000 ounces per year. We think our drilling this year will get us into that new category, which will get a lot of attention, I think, which is what you want to do.
So you're kind of expanding from all directions there.
Pretty much, yeah. And we also drilled our Nitra property. If you remember, we had a secondary property that's about 1.5 kilometers away from AurMac to the west. We put 3 drill holes in that. We did some more soils and some more trenching there. We think it has a lot of similarities to Powerline.
Brilliant. And you touched on right at the start, you do have some significant neighbours around you. Do they have capacity, like producing capacity, like excess?
Well, Hecla beside us, they have a mill. It's not geared up for the type of mineralization, but they're not currently using it. They're really focusing on their underground development. But the thing that Hecla has is a lot of cash. So interesting to see what their interest in the Yukon is. They've done pretty well in this market, and right now they're focused on Alexco. But my sense is that they have a broad interest in the Yukon. Victoria Gold down the road, they're a 12.5% shareholder of Banyan, so we share some resources with them. Even now, geologists, young geos, I think it's really good to move people around and get them to see different things. But they're starting to ramp up, and they're cash flowing pretty significantly. And while they're currently focused on their own internal improvements to get themselves up to their nameplate production and maybe even higher, at some point they'll be looking to either expand or look for other assets to grow. So that's exciting for us. Time will tell what happens in the Yukon. I think we've got an exciting year ahead of us.
Definitely. No, it's nice to kind of look in the future, and if you've got neighbours who might be able to, help with that, it definitely helps. But in terms of the extraction process, what's the metallurgy like? Is it quite straightforward?
So our best example is, of course, Victoria Gold, which is a heap leach project next door. And so they have a heap leach pad and an ADR plant. We envision that this project right now would be a heap leach project. We're working on the metallurgy. We've done bottle rolls on pulps, came back with 90% from both Airstrip, Powerline, oxide and sulfide. We've moved forward with a metallurgical program which is pretty robust. We've hired the same company which Victoria Gold is using for their grade reconciliation and metallurgy. And if you look at the challenges they have, it hasn't been metallurgy at Victoria Gold. They've actually got really good grade reconciliation with what they've been recovering. So we thought, go with the experts. And we've designed a program which started with some vat leach testing, which is very similar to column leach testing, except for you separate it by grain size. And we're moving forward with a whole range of testing so that we've explored all the options. Column tests will be starting early here in 2023, along with everything from looking at how it grinds, gravity, separation, even flotation, so that we know what the answers are when people come and knock on the door. But spent quite a bit of time actually designing a program so that it's both cost effective and gives us all the answers that we want. So that will come through 2023 and we'll have the answers. I know shareholders are waiting to hear that. Metallurgy is not fast. It's also expensive, so you want to make sure you've done it right.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the geology across the neighbours, is it fairly similar to your Victoria Gold, or is it different at your property?
It is. Victoria Gold is actually mining the granodiorite, which is the intrusion. Their mineralization does bleed out into the metasediments which surround the Eagle deposit. Their Raven and other deposits are different, and they just put out a new 1 million ounce resource, 1.6 at their Raven, which is pretty exciting. They are actually leaching their metasediments originally in the mine plan or the feasibility study that area into the metasediments was a layback, which was waste, but subsequent work with metallurgy and they're actually putting that on the leach pad. So that's positive. It's not exactly the same as ours. We are in the highland group of metasediments. So somewhere there's an intrusion that's created this mineralization and it's spread out into the metasediments. We're still looking for that intrusion. We've got some good indicators from what we've learned this year. We now have a huge database. We're able to look at the gold bismuth ratios, look for heat flow directions. We think some things that we've drilled this year are very exciting and are going to really help us to target higher grade with the 15,000 meters that we have to drill next year.
Yeah, no, that all sounds really awesome. I look forward to following along with it. You are based in the Yukon, and so obviously there is the First Nation aspect. How do you find the relationships with First Nations and also other stakeholders?
That's really important for any explorer, and it's something we've taken very seriously. Our First Nation is the Nacho Dun. They are a self-governing First Nation. So in Canada, specifically the Yukon, there are settled and unsettled First Nations, and we're really fortunate that we are in the jurisdiction with a settled First Nation that knows mining, because they participated right from the beginning in the permitting process for Victoria Gold, which is a similar heap leach project. So they've got a very collaborative relationship with them, as well as Hecla right next door. So the Nacho Dun's Development Corp also has businesses which benefit from mining and which we use and which the other mining companies use. So it's a very collaborative relationship. Of course, there's always the expectations of high environmental standards, which we're very happy to do because that's important for us as well. We do a lot of local hiring and our engagement in the community, which I think is so important. We preferentially train young people or people from the community to work for us, and we've had very good success in retaining local hires, which in this labor market is really it helps us and it helps the community. So we're fortunate to have really good community relations, and it's something that will help us as we move into permitting.
Yeah, no, that's lovely to hear. So in terms of the next steps for AurMac, is it permitting? You mentioned about, the surrounding properties. Do you think that's in the future?
We started our baseline environmental work 3 years ago, as well as getting the data from Alexco and Victoria Gold. So we'd have that baseline data if we wanted to start permitting. What we found this last year really excites me, that I'm not sure we found the best yet. I think we really want to still focus on finding some higher grade areas. Our two goals for this year were to expand it to Tier 1 status and also to find high grade starter pit areas. We found a few. The hole we just released the last week really was quite exciting. 84 meters of 1.14 in an area all by itself. And we really do have to follow up on that. We've had other great results. 1.8 grams per ton over 31 meters. 1.5 grams per ton results near surface. I think this project, if you look back, really has only had a very short timeline. We made the discovery at Powerline in 2019. And then already had a resource by 2020. Most companies spend quite a few years before they have their first resource. So, I kind of look at it, what we've really only had 2 years. I think we should really do another year of exploration before we rush into permitting. I think lots of projects get they get too anxious to get a PEA because that's what they have, and they haven't necessarily looked around to see if they've got the best project yet. So especially in this market, I think rushing to a PEA or into permitting wouldn't be the right move for us.
Yeah, no, of course. And that leads nicely into the next question. What's your vision for Banyan over the next 5 years? Where do you see it going?
Well, that's the markets will tell us where a lot of these exploration projects are going, and of course the goal of any junior is to tee up the scale of deposit, the grade, do all the technical work that would be needed to both design the project, whether it's a PEA or moving to a feasibility study and moving into permitting. But first, you got to get the right project. So, am I excited to take it through that? Absolutely. My skill set, I think, really continue to grow this project, optimize the project, get it through permitting, Do I think that's going to happen? Well, I think there's not very many projects that have 6 million plus ounce potential in a permittable jurisdiction with the exceptional infrastructure that we have. We've got a road, we've got a power line that has capacity, we have cell phone service right on the property, as you saw, fiber optic cable going right by. I think once we get to that scale and show that it has the potential for higher grade areas, I think we're going to be a pretty desirable asset, whether it's for a Victoria Gold right beside us, other majors that are looking to add ounces to their balance sheets. All of them have depleting reserves. I think it's a pretty exciting place to be. We also have a First Nation that knows mining, a permittable jurisdiction, it's stable. There's not a lot of those around these days, so I hope I get the chance to take it all the way through feasibility study and permitting, but I'm thinking that there's probably a lot of other options on what the outcome might be in 5 years. And 5 years is a really long time. Look how far we've come from nothing in 2017 when we optioned the property to a 4 million ounce resource this spring and growing it very rapidly. That's pretty fast for a mineral project. A lot of times it takes quite a few years before you get to the stage where we are now.
Yeah, very true. And I mean, you touched on the infrastructure there, and seeing it firsthand myself when I was on site, it is incredible to have the power line and the cell service, and the roads are excellent around there. So good thing to mention that. But just to kind of finish up here, what are you most proud of over the past 12 months that as a company you've achieved?
I'm really proud at how we've quite a few things. On the community side, I'm really proud at how our team really works with community members, preferentially hires and trains people. I'm proud of their safety record, which is also really important to me. And of course, I'm proud of how we spent our money. That resource, less than $5 per ounce in cost. We're really careful on how we spend our money, and we work hard to make sure we're doing our exploration in an efficient manner. Over 85% of our dollars that we've raised go into the ground in the project. So I'm proud of that. And of course, I'm proud of just how big of a resource we've managed to achieve in such a short time period. So we've got a really great team out there, and people that I really enjoy working with, and that really makes a difference. So it's actually pretty fun.
I would hope so. And if there's one key milestone that we can look out for over the next 12 months, what do you think it could be?
Look out for that resource update that we'll have in 2023. Look out for continued results from this year's drilling as well as next year's drilling and our targets, which I think will generate some excitement.
No, I look forward to following along, and thank you so much for your time today, Tara. I look forward to our next catch-up.
Me too. Thanks a lot.